For anyone participating in tonight's program from Pennsylvania or outside of Ohio, I put a map up on the screen there. You'll find information that's the same as on this map here that outlines our tuition and fees for the areas outside of Ohio. YSU does significantly discount the tuition rate for specific counties in Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and New York. These counties, which you can see in the tan area on the map, are referred to as our affordable advantage tuition area. So at this time, I would like to get into tonight's presentation. And this is a list of topics that we're going to discuss tonight. We're going to talk about how financial aid is defined. What are the factors that go into figuring out how much financial aid you're entitled to as a student per year? The components that go into figuring out that formula, which is your cost of attendance, the expected family contribution component, and we'll define what your financial need is. We'll talk about the categories, types, and sources of different types of financial aid. And we'll talk about the FAFSA application, which is the federal application for federal student aid that you have to complete, and we suggest you complete every academic year. And in conclusion, we'll talk about some special circumstances of situations that might fall outside of the area or box of normal or traditional situations. And you may be experiencing some of these, especially with what's going on now with the pandemic and the unemployment rate and things like that right now. So we'll help you through all of those processes. So to get started here, we define financial aid as any type of funding provided to students and parents and families, for that matter, to help pay for post-secondary educational expenses. And those expenses come in many forms. So you have direct expenses that the college or the university will bill you for per year and per semester. Those would be your tuition and fees. If you live on campus, it could be your room and board charges. But you also, as a student, have different types of costs that come about just from you being a college student. Things like your books and supplies. You'll have to buy supplies and books for every class that you attend in college. That's on you, typically. School does not bill you directly for these things. We here at Youngstown State University have a large population of students that commute to and from school every day. So they have a transportation component to their cost. So these are all examples, whether they're direct or indirect. They're examples of costs that are worked into your total picture of what it's going to cost to go to school. It's referred to as cost of attendance. Now, remember, from school to school, for those of you that are looking at different schools and comparing prices, price tags, and financial aid award offers, the cost of attendance will change from school to school, especially if you're comparing state institutions to private institutions or in-state versus out-of-state. What will not change for you is the second component that goes into figuring out your financial aid package, and that's called the expected family contribution. You'll hear the financial aid administrators and staff members across the nation that work in financial aid offices at colleges and universities. They'll refer to this as the EFC. And what this number actually is a result of the federal FAFSA application. This number will not change from school to school, no matter where you attend. This number represents the family's ability to pay for those post-secondary educational expenses. And there's two components that go into figuring out your expected family contribution. There is the student contribution and component and the parent component. And this is true for dependent students. A dependent student is defined in the eyes of the government for financial aid purposes as a student who is under the age of 24 that cannot answer yes to any of the dependency status questions listed on the FAFSA application, which we'll talk about later on. So the two components that we mentioned, the cost of attendance and the expected family contribution, allow us to figure out your financial need for one academic year. This is how the financial aid offices figure out how we can generate your award packages, or what should be included and how much of certain types of financial aid should be included on your award packages. So you take the cost of attendance at the school, you subtract the expected family contribution, and you simply come up with your financial need level for that academic year. This is a reason for those of you that are shopping schools and comparing financial aid award packages. This is why no two financial aid award packages will match exactly. It's because the cost of attendance could vary from school to school. So some schools will build in certain campus-based funding to help close that gap if they're a little more expensive than another school. So remember, the financial aid packages you cannot compare as equal when you're comparing each award offer. So getting into the different categories of financial aid, they fall into two basic categories. They're either non-need-based or need-based type of financial aid. And within those two types, there's 4 types of aid that could be offered to you. 2 of them, as you see on the left side of your screen there, are considered self-help options. These are your loans or your ability or opportunity to work through the federal student work study program on a university's campus. We consider those self-help options because you are actually either working toward those funds or having to repay them someday. The other 2 types of financial aid that could be available are your gift aid types, such as scholarships and grants. Now, scholarships is one type of gift aid that does not have to be paid back. These scholarships are usually awarded based on students' merit, skill, or unique characteristic. Obviously, your grade point average and standardized test scores with the ACT or SAT will play into your merit-based eligibility. But some students choose to seek an opportunity to play sports on campus at a college or university. Those students might qualify based on their skills for an athletic scholarship, for example. So those are the 3 areas that you could be awarded scholarships based on. And I'll just take a moment to highlight our Youngstown State University Foundation and actually say thank you to the foundation for all of their hard work in supporting our students. And you can see here on the list, compared to our competitors, YSU holds over $250 million of endowment asset funding from outside donors, funds that are used to help students succeed and meet their goals in college. Compared to our competitors, local competitors, Kent State holds just under $140 million, University of Akron, $220 million. And you can see our YSU Foundation is committed to funding scholarships, whether they're through departments or colleges on campus, or like I said, outside scholarship endowments to help our students succeed. Now, we here at YSU have our own incoming freshman scholarship structure known as the Freshman Scholarships for Excellence program. Now, this scholarship structure is outlined in the guide that we provided you with that I mentioned earlier. So you can research that or reiterate this later on as well. But you can see there on the list that we have different levels of scholarships that a student can automatically qualify for when they apply to YSU, as long as they meet the minimum criteria for that scholarship. So a student applying to YSU can get one of the scholarships you see on the screen there based on your high school grade point average, cumulative grade point average. And we do go by final GPA on your final transcript in combination with ACT or SAT scores. And as an example, I'll highlight the First Opportunity Scholarship, which is worth $1,000 per year. That is renewable. All scholarships on this list are renewable. As long as you maintain full-time status, which is completing 24 hours in the academic year, and maintaining a 3.0 GPA, you will renew this continuing for up to possibly 4 years. So the $1,000 could be $4,000 over 4 years. And to get this First Opportunity Scholarship, you simply have to have a cumulative GPA in high school of 3.0 or higher, with at least an ACT of 19 composite score or an SAT of 990. And we do not super score here, by the way, at YSU to fund these scholarship opportunities. If, by the way, you graduate valedictorian of your graduating class, that's an automatic trustee scholarship award for $5,000 a year, which could be $20,000 over 4 years. We also, in the category of scholarships here at YSU, have the University Honors College Awards. These are for incoming freshmen. There is a separate application to qualify for the Honors College. Early deadlines do apply. You have to have a minimum ACT score of 26 or a 1240 combined math and verbal writing score for the SAT with a cumulative of 3.5 or higher grade point average in high school. Now, if you apply to the Honors College, you're also putting yourself in for scholarship opportunity and possibly what we consider our full ride scholarship here, the Leslie Cochran University Scholars Award, which could take care of all tuition and fees, on-campus room and board, and even some money for books. If you do not get the University Scholars Award, you can still get scholarship money that ranges anywhere from $5,000 all the way up to the full ride $18,000 scholarship that can be stacked on top of the scholarships I showed in the prior grid for the scholarships for excellence. Now, the only scholarship that would not stack on top of the other ones but would actually override the scholarship for excellence would be if you got or received the University Scholarship Honors Award, the Leslie Cochran Award. This is a screenshot of our homepage here in the Office of Financial Aid and Scholarships. You can see that we have buttons that go across the screen that take you to different areas of our site. We have a very user-friendly site. Those links will take you to the financial aid snapshot, which gives you an overview of your whole financial situation here on campus, along with your award offer from semester to semester. We have a scholarship search engine. We have a tuition estimator for students that want to log in and kind of play with the tuition rates, living on campus versus off campus, going full-time versus part-time, things like that. We have a financial aid estimator that you can use to kind of gauge what your FAFSA result might be in relation and your contribution in relation to what the cost is. We have a loan repayment estimator for you that is linked to the Department of Education. All of our forms and applications that are required through our department that we might mandate that you have to fill out at some point are listed through the forms and application section. And we also have a button that takes you right to the YSU Foundation Scholarship application right from our homepage here. You can see that to the right underneath the picture there, the YSU Foundation Scholarship application, which, by the way, is an electronic application that we suggest that all students complete every academic year. Now, the YSU Foundation Scholarship application does tie into the completion of the FAFSA. So we do encourage students to fill FAFSAs out, even if you don't feel like you will qualify for certain types of financial aid. That application can still be used to see, in combination with your foundation scholarship application, to see if you qualify for certain scholarships that are need-based. The other type of gift aid is defined as grants. So grant money does not have to be paid back as well, just like scholarship money. But the difference between a grant and a scholarship is your grant is usually awarded based on the student's financial need. Now remember, we calculate your need by taking the cost of attendance and subtracting the expected family contribution. And the only way to get that expected family contribution is for you to complete a FAFSA application. The self-help options include loans. Now, as President Tressel said in his opening remarks, we are committed truly here in the Office of Financial Aid and Scholarship and a staff at YSU as a whole to minimizing your loan debt as much as possible. So we encourage students and parents to borrow only what is really needed to help cover your balance that is not covered by scholarships or grants and that cannot be covered with an out-of-pocket payment. There are certain steps that first-time freshmen have to take when borrowing a loan, which include the master promissory note and completing an entrance counseling exam, which kind of gets you on your feet and understanding what the loan process is all about through the government site. These steps are one-time completion steps that you will not have to do from year to year if you remain at YSU for the duration of your degree. So again, we only want to see you borrow what you need. So we're committed here. We will help you budget your financial aid award offers to make sure you are maximizing your free aid and minimizing that loan debt. The other self-help option that we mentioned was the Federal Work-Study Program. Basically, the Federal Work-Study Program is a job on campus for students. It's student employment. The reason why it comes up in financial aid is there are certain amounts of fundings through the Department of Education, through the federal government, that every school gets to distribute to pay students to work on campus. So the reason why you indicate on the FAFSA if you're interested in work study and why it comes into play with your financial need is because it's a need-based award that we allow you to have access to money to work toward. So you would get a job on campus as a student employee, and the paychecks that you're working toward are funded through the federal government. Now, we don't only have federal work study jobs on campus. There are jobs on campus where departments will choose to pay you out of their own budget, but it doesn't hurt if you qualify for federal work study to have an edge on getting a job on campus. The different sources of financial aid that you'll come across, the federal government, the state that you come from is a possibility, the college and university itself, private sources, and even employers. So the federal government, they're the largest source of financial aid that you're going to find. They award primarily on the basis of financial need. You have to complete a federal FAFSA application every academic year to see if you qualify for any of the need-based awards. And if you want to borrow a loan even if you don't qualify for need-based grants, you still have to complete a FAFSA application for the school to be able to offer you a loan for an academic year. This is a list of common federal aid programs. You'll see the Pell Grant listed there. You'll see the Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, or we refer to it as FSEOG. This is a supplemental grant to the Pell Grant if you have maximum need. The Federal Work Study Program, of course, is a federal program. Your direct Stafford loans in the student's name, you have to have a FAFSA on file because it's a federal program. And any money that is offered even to parents to supplement the student's aid, such as the Parent Plus loan. That's a federal program that you do have to have the FAFSA completed for. The state you come from could offer some eligibility as well. Obviously, residency requirements apply. Some states can award based on merit and need. They use the information from the FAFSA, just like the federal government, to determine your eligibility. Now, every state has a different deadline for the FAFSA to be completed per year. So make sure you're doing an early FAFSA application. We'll talk about deadlines coming up here in a minute. But the states, be aware, sometimes have different deadlines than even the schools put out there. So early submission of your FAFSA is highly encouraged. The Ohio College Opportunity Grant is an example of a state grant. So this is the grant for Ohio residents. You can see there that full-time awards vary from the different types of schools that are out there in Ohio. If you are a student at YSU, you would fall under the public main campus university, and you can get up to $2,000 per academic year as long as you qualify with your FAFSA results. Now, there is a limit to the amount of aid that a student can get throughout their time in college. That's true of the federal money and the state money. So for Ohio, the state government will give you 10 semesters worth of eligibility as long as you qualify. The college and university itself obviously provides scholarships, campus-based grants. For example, we have a housing grant here. It's a need-based grant that we can award students that are living in our courtyard apartments or in our residence halls here on campus. This could be gift aid or self-help aid. So some colleges and universities have their own types of campus-based loans or programs that you can even work to help pay for college expenses. Always check with colleges for their deadlines for these types of campus-based fundings. Each college will set their own priority deadlines for having applications completed. Private sources, very quickly, I'm just going to mention here things, places that you can look for outside scholarships, even foundations, businesses, churches, civic and charitable organizations. Just be aware that deadlines could apply to these types of scholarships and fundings as well. So we encourage you to start looking for these early. Employers, this is something that students and even parents don't even think to look into sometimes, but parents that work for companies, you might have a program through your employer that helps reimburse tuition for your student or provides a scholarship opportunity for your tuition or for your student because you work for their company. So students, we've had students that work for chain restaurants who are able to apply for a scholarship through that restaurant through the corporate office. So these are just examples of some other sources to look for additional funding for the students. So now we're going to get into talking about the FAFSA application. And if you want to, at this time, if you have printed this out, this is the pre-application worksheet. I mentioned it earlier, you do have a link to this. If you didn't print it out, you could follow along on the screen here as well and take a look at it later on. But let's define the FAFSA for a second. Like I said, it's called the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. And notice the first F in FAFSA stands for free. So you should not have to pay anyone to complete this FAFSA application for you. This is here at Youngstown State University, this is a public service we provide, even if you're considering YSU and you're not even accepted here yet or even applied. We will help you fill the FAFSA application out. Like I said, it's a public service we provide, and you should not pay an agency, a website, a person to fill this out for you. This application is a federal application that collects the demographic and financial information of the student and their household. It generates one result, which is what we defined earlier as the expected family contribution, or the EFC. The colleges and universities, remember, use this EFC to calculate your financial need for one academic year. And I say one academic year because you do complete this FAFSA every year. Now, we say that the FAFSA can be completed electronically or by using the paper form. And by the way, this is not the paper form. This is just a cheat sheet that helps you get through the questions of what they're going to ask you. So do not submit the pre-application worksheet as a paper application. It will not be accepted by the government. But we strongly encourage you to fill it out online if possible. Now, the FAFSA can be filled out at any time during the academic year. No earlier than October 1st, but you also want to meet the deadline for the school you're attending. YSU has a priority consideration deadline. So for all incoming freshmen, we tell you that you should have your FAFSA completed if you're a senior now by December 1st to attend here in the 21-22 school year. Now, as you move forward into your sophomore, junior, senior years, that priority consideration deadline does move to mid-February. Now, obviously, we're toward the end of October here, and the FAFSA has been out there for about a month. So you're not too late in getting started on it. Just know that the FAFSA will not be available until October 1st for the next academic year each year. The FAFSA will ask for information regarding finances by requesting information from your federal tax returns. The government calls this process of using the information prior year information, or PPY information. The reason being is you will use 2 years prior tax information for the year of attendance in school. So, for example, students that are attending in the 2021-22 school year will be using 2019 federal tax numbers to calculate your FAFSA result. Now, it used to be that the government required that we use the prior tax year. Using prior year, or 2 years backward, actually allows you to do the FAFSA much earlier, because all of you who file taxes should by this time have your 2019 taxes completed, and you can get your FAFSA in a timely manner here. All students that complete a FAFSA application need to apply for an FSA ID, a federal student aid identification. The parent of the student, if the student is dependent, also needs an FSA ID. So one parent plus the student each have their own username and password, which can be applied for by going to the Federal Department of Education site, fsaid.ed.gov. If you don't already have one, chances are, if you're a high school senior and you didn't do your FAFSA yet, and this is your first time completing a FAFSA, you need to apply for an FSA ID. Parents, it is possible that you already have an ID in your name. You may have another child that went through college or is in college now, and you have an established FSA ID in your name. In this case, you will use the same ID you use for your other students. We even have parents that are students themselves. They fill out a FAFSA in their own name from year to year. And if that's the case, you already have an FSA ID established. You will use that same FSA ID that you use for yourself as a student to sign and log into the application for your student or your child. This is a screenshot of the FAFSA on the Web official website. And you'll see there that it is a government website, secure. It's a .gov address. So studentaid.gov will take you to the Department of Education's federal site, where you can log in to complete the FAFSA. And as I've mentioned, the FAFSA for the 21-22 school year is already out there. Now, please do not get mixed up or confused when logging into this site, because remember, I said you can fill out a FAFSA anytime throughout the academic year. Well, we are still within the 20-21 school year right now. It's ongoing, and it will continue into our spring semester starting in January. So students still have an option that are in school now with us to complete the 2021 FAFSA. So make sure you're completing the correct academic year's application when you log into this site. So again, seniors dealing with the 21-22 school year, make sure you're completing the 21-22 FAFSA application. And I quickly want to mention that the government did activate a My Student Aid mobile app. The application on your mobile device can be downloaded and used to complete the FAFSA in the same order. Questions are in the same order as they would be in the FAFSA on the web application. And you will move through the questions, have the same options to transfer data into the application from the IRS, the same signature options to sign the application using your FSA ID, and it will give you a confirmation of submission and an estimated result at the end, just like the FAFSA on the web. And most importantly, this app is as safe and secure as the computer website using your desktop. So benefits of doing the FAFSA online using what we call FOTW, FAFSA on the web, or through the My Student Aid mobile app. The benefits are that you can utilize the IRS data retrieval tool. This allows you to transfer numbers from the IRS directly into the FAFSA application. It has built-in edits to prevent costly errors. It has skip logic, which is nice. I consider it a smart application because answers that you provide early on will dictate what it asks you as you move through the application. It will eliminate unnecessary questions and make sure it's asking you questions that come into play to calculate your financial need. It's a more timely submission, obviously, than mailing in a paper FAFSA, especially for processing. There is detailed help sections on the application down the sidebar that walks you through any questions or issues you're having when filling out this application. It gives you the ability to go in and check the status at any time. But most importantly, it simplifies this whole application FAFSA process for you for years to come. So for your sophomore, junior, senior year, you simply log into an application that you've completed your freshman year, and you complete what's called a FAFSA renewal, where all of your basic information is already saved. Now, I mentioned the IRS data retrieval tool. So let me talk about that for a minute. This allows certain tax return information to be transferred into the FAFSA electronically from the IRS. Participants using this option will voluntarily use their FSA ID to link the FAFSA to the IRS, and then with your permission, transfer that data instead of having to go through and manually type in numbers from your tax forms into the FAFSA. The numbers will automatically fill into the application. This is highly encouraged if you have the option to use it. This reduces the amount of documentation by the financial aid office. If you're selected for a process where we have to audit your FAFSA, right now this option is activated and working. I have personally used this already to help students fill out the FAFSA for next year. So it is available and it is working for the 21-22 school year. There are certain tax filers that cannot use the IRS data retrieval tool, unfortunately. It works the best for students' parents that are single and file as head of household or as a single preparer. Married parents, if you file a joint tax return, it works for that situation to pull in the data right to the FAFSA application. In short, it pulls in data from one tax form, I should say. If you are a family that files, you're married, but you filed separate tax returns, it will not pull in separate tax returns. So you will not have the option to use this. So if you got married, let's say you're a parent that recently got married, but you were not married in the year of 2019, you are mandated to use your tax information combined with your spouse's information, because the step parent is required to be on the FAFSA if the parent is remarried. In that case, you would not have been married in 2019, and you would have a separate tax form than your spouse, the step parent. So in that case, you would not have the option to use the data retrieval tool. And there's some other uncommon situations listed here that you could review. So I mentioned earlier that when using the data retrieval tool and pulling your numbers in electronically from the IRS to the FAFSA, it could reduce the amount of documentation that the school would request if you were selected for an audit of your FAFSA application. That audit is referred to as the federal verification process. Now, verification is basically used to check the accuracy of the information that goes into the FAFSA application. It ensures that the parents and the students are providing accurate financial information to make sure that the student's not receiving more than they should, and in some cases, not receiving less than they should. There are situations where students and parents try to complete the FAFSA on their own and something is marked in there incorrectly, and then through verification, we correct it. And sometimes it's to the student's benefit with the result and sometimes not. But in the end, it's an accurate picture of how the application should read. Students who are selected for this verification process will be notified on their final acknowledgement from the Department of Education. And we'll get into that in a second. That's referred to as the student aid report that you'll get from the government after this is fully completed. Just know also, if you're not selected by the Department of Education for verification, then the school, if something is in question, we can put your file into verification at our discretion. So the school can ask for additional documentation to verify accuracy of the FAFSA data. If you are selected for verification, the student will be notified by the school to send specific materials, whether it's information about the taxes or W-2s or 1099 forms that go into your taxes. It could be information about your assets or any relevant financial documents, just to verify that everything going in there is correct. Know that until the verification requirements are complete and you submit everything that is requested, the Office of Financial Aid cannot disperse funds to the student or even generate an award offer for you, which would include all of the different types of financial aid. So a helpful hint is from year to year, keep a file marked FAFSA and keep all of that year's relevant tax documentation, whether it's the tax transcripts that you hold, the 1040s, the 1099s, the W-2s, bank statements. If you have documents recorded or showing any untaxed income you might receive as a household or as a parent, such as child support, workman's compensation, veterans benefits that are not taxable, keep all of that information because they will ask you for it on the FAFSA. If you need to make a correction to the FAFSA, there are a few ways you could go about doing this. When you make a correction, you could go back onto the web to the FAFSA application, logging in with your FSA ID and indicating that you would like to make a correction, and then you can get to the section that you have to make the correction in, make the correction, and resubmit the FAFSA application. You can also make a correction through the student aid report, which I'll talk about that in a little bit here, the STAR we refer to it as. You could submit documentation, which in reality is probably the easiest and most beneficial way for you to make a correction, is to let us do it for you through the school. We will put it through the verification process and make sure everything is correct through that process. So now, looking at the actual FAFSA application, you can follow along if you have a copy of this or if you printed this out, your FAFSA on the web worksheet. If not, we have some screenshots here in the PowerPoint presentation, but there's basically 4 sections on the FAFSA that we work through before you sign it at the end. We have the student information section, the student dependency status section, the parent financial information, and then the student financial information. So in the general student information, most of this information is automatically populated when the student logs in using their FSA ID. So your social security number should automatically pre-fill into the application along with your name and birth date. They're going to ask the student about their marital status, their citizenship status, if they've ever had any drug convictions. Males that are completing this application will be asked if they are registered with a selective service. If not, you must register, and you can register through the FAFSA if you're not already. At the age of 18, males must register with selective service to qualify for federal student aid. They will also ask what the level of school was completed by your parents. So parents that graduated college or have a high school diploma, they're going to ask about a biological parent level of completion for school. Then we move into the dependency status section. After all of the demographic information and contact information is put in there from the student, then they want to know if the student is dependent or not. Should they be using parents' information on this application? Now remember, I said that the Department of Education, they consider you as a student as dependent if you're under the age of 24. So that is the first question that's automatically populated because it calculates from your birth date that's entered. So if you are not 24 or older, there are other questions that come up that they ask you that could make you independent. Questions such as, are you married? Were you in the armed forces and considered a veteran or on active duty and released from active duty? Were you in foster care since turning the age of 13 or not? And do you have documentation to show that? If you are under 24, but both parents are deceased, you would automatically be considered independent. Now, independent status means you do not have to provide parent information. So answering yes to any of these questions that come up in this section could make you independent. Now, in the normal, typical situation, most students that are under 24 and they're coming right out of high school, they answer no to all of these questions and they are considered dependent. And it automatically takes you to the parent information section. There's no way to bypass that. A very common question on here that we get answered yes if you're under 24 is if the student was ever in legal guardianship or a ward of the court as of the age of 13. Legal guardianship of someone other than their biological parents. So if you have court documentation to show that, if grandma or grandpa raised you, aunt or uncle raised you, if you have the legal document showing that, you answer yes to that question and it will automatically skip the parental information. Now, either the parent is included on the FAFSA or the student is independent. No one else should be used on the FAFSA in the parental section. Grandparents should not, aunt, uncle, close friend who the student might be living with and is supporting the student. Only the parents should be included on the FAFSA. So a parent is considered someone who is the biological or adoptive parent of the student. If the student was not in legal guardianship of someone other than their parents, but they have no contact with their parents or they were raised by a grandparent, for instance, that student has a special circumstance that they need to work with the Office of Financial Aid to get through. When they ask questions of the parents in this section, the income information that is asked is your adjusted gross income on your tax form. Now remember, for 21-22, you'll be using numbers from 2019. So you will have your tax forms in front of you. When it asks for the tax information, it will initially ask if you qualify to use a data retrieval tool. If you choose to do this and you successfully link with the IRS, you will pull your numbers through electronically and you will not have to type in any of the tax information. You will only have to answer questions about your household situation. So, remember I said earlier that this is a SMART application. It has skip logic. So when they ask for the parent's marital status, if a parent answers divorced or widowed or single. It will not ask you information about a second parent. If the parent is married or remarried, you have to indicate that you are married and the date of marriage. At this point, you will provide information for both parents. So either both biological parents or one biological parent and a step parent. Also in the financial section, they are going to take into consideration the tax that you pay for that tax year. They will ask for if it plays into your situation and it would benefit you. The SMART application will determine if it asks you if you receive Medicaid, Social Security income, if you have kids in school, or if your students starting college in the last 2 years have received a free or reduced price lunch at their high school. These are all situations that could help define your need level or help you display a level of financial need. They will also ask about additional financial information. Some shows up on tax forms, some does not. An example of this would be if you've gotten an education credit on your taxes, or if you have, if you pay child support out of your household. So parents, if you are a step parent of the student and you have other children that you pay child support for, it will play into your FAFSA result as money leaving your household, but you will have to prove that to us if selected for the verification process. It also asks about certain untaxed information. Remember earlier I said keep track of child support documents. It will ask you how much money you received in child support for 1 year, for the tax year in question. Even if child support stopped, you have to report the child support received in that year. So the year we're talking about now would be 2019. It's going to ask about workman's compensation, if you receive any veterans non-education benefits. These are all types of untaxed income that go into the FAFSA result. Now, if you received child support in 2019 and you don't have that same level of child support in the current year, you have a special circumstance that we could work with. But the proper way of completing this is to answer the questions as they ask them, and then you deal with a special circumstance later. The government does ask the parent to report the amount that you keep in checking and savings accounts. And we always advise the parents to answer this question as an average amount. After you pay your monthly bills, how much do you try to keep on average in your checking and savings account? They don't go through and check bank statements, or the government doesn't go out there and try to get into your accounts and figure out if you answer these very specifically and accurately. But we are able to tell sometimes about if this question is being answered accurately by the type of interest that shows up, for example, on your taxes. They're also going to ask the types of assets you have. This is very important because certain assets do not need to be reported. When they say assets and the value of your assets, you report the net value, which means the amount that it's valued at today of stocks, bonds, property other than the home you live in. You do not have to report your home that you live in as an asset, your cars, your possessions. None of that is reported. You do not have to include anything set aside for retirement. IRA funds, 401ks through your employer, you do not have to include this as an asset. They want to know if you have property other than the house you live in. They want to know if you have rentals, if you have stocks, bonds, CDs, things that you can liquidate and cash in now. These would be considered your assets. They also ask if the parent has a business to report the value of the business. I can tell you that you do not have to report that you have a business or the value of a business unless you have 100 or more employees working for you. So after all of the questions that they ask the parent, they will go into things such as how many people in the household are there besides the parents and the student. So if there are other children in the household, you report the total household size, okay? This goes into play with the FAFSA result because the more people in the household, the more need you display. They will also ask how many people in the household will be attending college for the academic year in question. Okay, if you have more than one child in school, parents, then you are displaying more financial need than someone that has, one student in school. So that does play into the result as well. So after answering these questions, the student will be asked the same exact questions as the parents regarding finances. So most students, and a lot of students that we help, they did not file taxes in 2019, and that would be the very first question in their section. Did you file a tax form for the year of 2019? If you answer no, it will skip all of the tax questions for the student. Now, they still will ask if the student earned wages from a W-2. They do this because a student could work and receive wages, but not make the level of money to where they have to or are required to file taxes. So some students had a job, maybe a part-time job, made a couple $1,000s. They did not file it. So they still would be considered a non-filer. You only indicate that you file taxes if you filed a federal 1040 form. And then if you did file as a student, it's going to walk you through the exact same questions regarding that tax form and give you the option as a student to connect with the IRS through the IRS data retrieval tool. So at the end of the application, it will ask about the college information. Which colleges and universities do you want this application to go to? I can tell you that it does not matter which order you do this. You can complete a FAFSA and then apply to a school, or you can apply to the schools and then complete the FAFSA. If you complete the FAFSA and decide on a different school that was not originally added to the FAFSA, that would be a correction. You would go into the same application you've already completed and just simply add the schools that you want the results to go to. Now, the school will not correspond with you unless they accept you. So if you apply to YSU and you complete the FAFSA and you include our school code on the FAFSA application for us to get the result, we will not pull that result into our database until we put you in our database as an accepted student. That would be true of any schools that you apply to. But it does not matter the order of how you do this. You can apply later and complete the FAFSA now and still include schools on there that you did not apply for. It will ask you on the FAFSA, once you pick the schools you want it sent to, what your housing plans are for that school. So it will say, do you want to live on campus, off campus, which would be considered like an apartment, but not typically on the campus itself, or are you going to live with parents and commute? It's going to finally ask for your signatures. You provide signatures electronically, and you do this by entering your FSA ID. Now, if you entered your FSA ID earlier in the application, it does not make you put it in again. So for example, parents that use the data retrieval tool, they would have used their FSA ID to link to the IRS. That information was saved to the end of the application where you can sign simply by pushing a signature button. If you did not use the data retrieval tool at the end of the application when it asks for a signature, this is when you will put your FSA ID username and password that you established into the application. If for some reason the FSA ID is not working correctly, or there's a glitch with the system where it's not accepting the FSA ID, there are other options to sign the application. For example, you can print out a signature page and mail it to the Department of Education. or you can even sign through the verification process at the school you're attending. This is a list of frequent errors that is made on the FAFSA application. In this first one, Social Security number, this starts all the way back with your FSA ID. When you apply for your FSA ID, you are linking it and associating it with your name, birth date, and Social Security number. We have had students misreport their Social Security number, and when they fill the FAFSA out, it's not really them that's filling out the FAFSA. What will happen eventually is the school will not be able to pull your data from the government into their database once you're accepted, because the Social Security numbers will not match up. So just be very conscious of the numbers you're typing in when you're applying for your FSA ID. Another error is in situations where there are parents that are divorced, widowed, or remarried. So just keep in mind, you're only using the parent that the student lives with. And if they are married, their spouse, remarried, their spouse. And if parents are single, they are just going off of their own information. Income earned by parents and step-parent. Some step-parents, if a family does a FAFSA on their own, we've had situations where a step-parent may not want their sensitive tax information on the FAFSA application, but it is unfortunately required by the government that if the parent of the student is remarried, that the step-parent's income and Social Security number, birth date, and demographic information goes into the application. Make sure you're reporting the correct amounts of untaxed income, the household size. You include everyone in the household, but the pets, you cannot include the pets in the household, unfortunately. Some parents tell us that the pets are more of an expense than the students, but it still holds true. You only include parents, student, and any siblings of the student that are under 24, or if you've claimed them on your taxes. The number of household members in college, make sure you're reporting that correctly. That could affect your FAFSA result. And when you're reporting real estate and investment net worths, remember it's net worth. So you are allowed to take into consideration any debt you have. For example, if you're reporting an asset that's a rental property and you have a mortgage on that property, you would take the value of it and subtract how much you owe on the property. That is what you would report. So getting to the end here, what happens after the FAFSA is completed? It goes through the central processing system at the government, and then the central processing system sends out two results, one to the student and one to the school listed on the FAFSA. The student's version is called, which I referred to earlier, the SAR, or Student Aid Report. This is basically just an acknowledgement that you completed the FAFSA, and this is all of the information that you entered. And by the way, if you need to make a correction, like I said earlier, you can do so on the Student Aid Report. And then the school itself, we get our own version of your Student Aid Report that we process here with the same exact information on it. So in conclusion, I'm going to go over a couple special circumstances, especially in the world we're living in right now, especially through this COVID-19 situation, and why we are presenting to you virtually tonight. There are situations where parents come to us and say, we are using tax numbers from a year that does not reflect what our true income is during the year that our student will be in school. And that is valid, and we will work with you on that. We are allowed to reassess a completed FAFSA result based on current year income situation. So parents, or even students yourselves, if you're affected, if you have a change in income, contact your financial aid department at the school you're attending. If it's YSU, we will work with you to try and reassess your FAFSA result to make sure you're getting the maximum aid that you're entitled to. If you have a special circumstance, you schedule an appointment with a counselor in our office, and we will assess your situation, request documents to rework the information, and you do not appeal this to the Department of Education. You deal with these special circumstance situations directly at the school that you decide to attend, and that school will make the changes on your behalf. This is a list of circumstances. I already mentioned the loss of employment. There are other situations that families run into besides loss of employment that we can deal with to help you. One common is divorce. If there's a divorce after the student starts school by the biological parents, or even a parent and a step-parent, we can work with that situation by separating the income. If there's an unfortunate situation with a parent's death or the spouse of a parent's death, we can work with that to rework the FAFSA result. If there's any unusual or uncovered medical or dental expenses that are not covered through insurance that you even might itemize on your taxes, we could work with that to subtract it off of your income and see if you qualify for more aid. Earlier, I talked about a situation where a student was not in legal guardianship of someone, but they were raised by grandparents and they don't have any legal documents and they don't have parent information to include on the FAFSA. In this situation, the student would do what we call a dependency override with our department, which is, again, a special circumstance through an appointment, and we will override the government rule given your situation if you qualify to make you independent when in normal circumstances you would not be considered independent by the government. And there are a number of other situations that we work with, and if you think you fall into any of these categories, please contact us so that we can help rework and reassess your FAFSA result to make sure you're getting the maximum aid possible. So now that we're at the end of our presentation, I would like to thank you for your attention throughout the presentation. There's a lot of information. Feel free to contact us about anything you have questions about that we discussed tonight. You have a copy of the PowerPoint to go through and reiterate. Hopefully you took notes. We will open up the phone lines when we shut down this presentation. Remember that main line number is 330-941-3505. We have a general email box that you could send questions, or even when you're a student here and you need to send documents or you have questions as a student continuing, you can send those to our general box and we'll respond in a timely manner there. We have appointments that we take. We have walk-in hours that you could come and see us Monday through Friday, 10 to 12 in the morning and 2 to 4 in the afternoon. We offer walk-ins. We do not need an appointment. If you think it's going to be a quick question, quick answer, or turning in some documents and you want to come in as a walk-in, if it's more involved and you want to schedule an appointment, we could block off an hour with a counselor for you to come in. We are located, if you're familiar with Youngstown or Youngstown State's campus, we're located right on Wick Avenue. Our building is Michelle Hall. We're on the second floor of Michelle Hall, and we're attached to the pedestrian bridge that connects campus to the parking garage. Our building is actually on the same side of the street as the parking garage. So feel free to call us if you have any questions. If you have questions about admission or applying to YSU, we've included their information as well. You could see that their main line number there is 941-2000. You could call that Monday through Friday, during normal business hours. They have a website, an official website, where questions go to their staff regarding admissions questions. They're located in Sweeney Hall, and they have a number of social media sites that you could check out